Keanu Reeves stepped inside the small roadside bar, pushing the door gently as it creaked open. The bar was dimly lit, filled with cigarette smoke and loud laughter. The wooden floor creaked under his boots as he walked quietly to a corner table. He didn't come with bodyguards, no fancy clothes, no sunglasses. Just a simple black jacket and jeans. Most of the people in the bar didn't notice him at first. He sat down alone, ordered a glass of water from the bartender, and kept to himself. His calm presence didn't draw attention. But after a few minutes, a group of bikers sitting at a table near the center of the room noticed him. One of the bikers, a big man with tattoos covering both arms, squinted at Keanu. He leaned over to his friends and whispered something, and they all started laughing loudly. Their laughter was hard to ignore now, and the bartender looked up nervously. The biker leader stood up and pointed at Keanu. "Hey, look who's here," he shouted so the whole bar could hear. "Mr. Hollywood himself." The other bikers laughed again, louder this time. Keanu didn't react. He just smiled gently and took a sip of water. His calm face showed no anger, no fear. "Hey, big star. Where's your camera crew? Are you practicing for your next action movie?" The biker mocked, taking slow steps toward Keanu's table. Keanu remained polite, giving the man a small nod but saying nothing. The other patrons in the bar began watching closely. The room grew tense, even though Keanu was famous for playing tough guys in movies. Here he was, alone, quiet, and not looking for a fight. The biker leader wasn't done. He kept pushing. "What's the matter, tough guy? Too scared to say something? I bet you can't even throw a real punch." His friends cheered him on, enjoying the moment. Keanu stayed calm. He didn't want to cause trouble. He knew this kind of behavior often came from insecurity, not real strength. He sat there quietly, hoping the man would lose interest and go away, but the biker leader took it as a sign of weakness. He stepped even closer, now standing right next to Keanu's table. He grabbed a chair and sat down without being invited, leaning forward and staring straight at Keanu's face. "Come on, Hollywood," he said in a mocking tone. "Why don't you show us some of those fancy moves from your movies?" His friends laughed again, enjoying the scene. The bartender, who had seen many bar fights before, felt nervous. He could tell this was heading in the wrong direction. But there was something strange about Keanu's expression. He looked completely at peace, even as this man mocked him in front of everyone. Then the biker leader crossed the line. He knocked over Keanu's glass of water, spilling it all over the table. The water dripped onto Keanu's jacket, but he didn't flinch. He calmly took a napkin and began wiping the water, still not saying a word. This silence made the biker leader even angrier. He wanted a reaction, but Keanu wouldn't give him one. The whole bar fell silent now, waiting to see what would happen next. One of the biker's friends shouted from the back, "Maybe he thinks he's too good to talk to us." The group laughed again, but this time their laughter felt hollow. The biker leader leaned even closer to Keanu. "You think you're better than us?" he asked, his voice low and cold. Keanu finally spoke, but his voice was soft and respectful. "No, not at all," he said gently. "I'm just here for some peace." His words didn't sound scared, but kind and honest. It was clear he didn't want to fight. But the biker leader didn't care. He was determined to get a rise out of him. The tension in the room was thick now. Every eye was on them. Even the bartender froze, unsure whether to intervene. Keanu sat perfectly still, showing no fear. His calmness was almost confusing. The biker leader raised his hand slightly, as if preparing to shove him, and the whole room seemed to hold its breath. At that moment, just as things were about to explode, the bar door opened slowly. A pair of boots stepped inside, heavy and steady. The door closed behind the figure, but the light from outside briefly illuminated his face. It was an older man, strong and quiet, with a beard and sharp eyes. The biker leader's face changed. Instantly when he saw who it was, the man who had just entered didn't need to say a word. His presence alone froze the bikers in place. Everyone in the bar knew this man. Chuck Norris had just walked in. The air inside the bar turned heavy as soon as Chuck Norris stepped inside. His steps were slow but strong, and without saying a word, he looked around the room. The bikers who were laughing moments ago suddenly went quiet. Even those who had no respect for anyone else knew exactly who this man was. Chuck's calm but serious face said everything. He had seen what was happening before he even reached the center of the room. The biker leader, who had been so loud and full of confidence, froze in place. His mocking smile disappeared as soon as his eyes met Chuck's. His friends, who had been cheering him on, lowered their drinks and looked away, unsure what to do now. Chuck walked straight to the table where Keanu was sitting. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. Every eye in the bar was on him, and his presence alone was enough to make the loudest men go silent. He stopped next to Keanu's table, then quietly pulled out a chair and sat down beside him. Keanu looked at Chuck and gave him a soft smile, almost like they shared an understanding without saying anything. Chuck returned a small nod before turning his attention to the biker leader. There was a long pause. The biker leader tried to speak, but no words came out. His face had lost its color, and his friends were no longer laughing. They were all staring at Chuck, waiting for his reaction. Chuck finally spoke. His voice was soft, but it carried a kind of power that didn't need to be loud. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, looking straight at the biker leader. The biker leader swallowed hard and quickly shook his head. "No problem, sir," he said, his voice now much smaller than before. Chuck raised an eyebrow, as if asking without words, "Are you sure?" The biker leader glanced at his friends, hoping one of them would help, but they all looked down, embarrassed. The same men who were laughing a few minutes ago now avoided Chuck's gaze, too ashamed to speak. The whole bar was silent except for the soft sound of the ceiling fan spinning slowly above. Chuck didn't need to stand up or raise his voice. He simply said, "Good, then let's keep it that way." Keanu stayed quiet the whole time. His calm presence hadn't changed from the moment the bikers first mocked him. But now, sitting next to Chuck, the bikers couldn't bring themselves to say another word. The bartender, who had been watching nervously from behind the counter, gave Chuck a grateful nod. He knew that if Chuck hadn't walked in, things might have gone in a very bad direction. But now, peace had returned to the room, and everyone felt the tension slowly disappear. The biker leader backed away from the table, muttering, "Sorry about that," as he quickly returned to his seat. His friends followed, heads down, no longer laughing or mocking anyone. Chuck leaned back in his chair and smiled quietly, as if this whole thing had been nothing but a small misunderstanding. Keanu turned toward him and said softly, "Thank you." Chuck just nodded again and said, "You handled it well. You didn't need me, but I thought I'd join you anyway." Keanu smiled, appreciating the kindness behind those words. Chuck ordered a glass of water from the bartender and sat calmly beside Keanu. The two men didn't speak much, but their quiet companionship said everything. It was as if they both understood something the others didn't. True strength didn't need to be loud or violent. It could be found in calm, kindness, and self-control. Across the room, the bikers sat awkwardly, occasionally glancing at Chuck and Keanu, but saying nothing. They had come in as the loudest voices in the bar, but now they sat as the quietest, thinking about what had just happened. The rest of the customers in the bar slowly returned to their drinks and conversations, but the atmosphere had changed. There was a feeling of respect now, both for Keanu, who had remained peaceful despite being mocked, and for Chuck, whose quiet presence alone had diffused the situation. Even the biker leader, who had tried so hard to show off, couldn't help but feel a strange sense of admiration. He realized that true respect wasn't something that could be forced or shouted. It was earned by being calm, kind, and knowing when to act and when not to. As the evening went on, the bar felt a little warmer, a little friendlier. Chuck and Keanu stayed seated at the same table, enjoying a quiet moment together. Two men who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The bar felt calmer now, but people were still watching closely. No one wanted to miss this moment. Chuck Norris and Keanu Reeves sitting together at one table, it felt unreal to everyone in the room. Even the bartender, who had seen all kinds of strange things over the years, couldn't help but smile as he wiped down the counter. The biker leader sat stiffly at his table, stealing quick glances toward Chuck and Keanu. He felt awkward, even a little guilty. He hadn't expected things to turn out like this. At first, he thought it would just be a laugh with his friends, but now it all felt different. He had mocked a man who didn't fight back, a man who stayed calm and polite even when provoked. That man had shown more strength than the loudest biker in the room. The biker leader lowered his drink and whispered to one of his friends, "Maybe we went too far." His friend nodded quietly, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Meanwhile, Chuck took a small sip of water and leaned back slightly in his chair. He wasn't there to cause trouble. His very presence had already brought peace. But he could feel the heavy air in the room, like everyone was waiting to see what would happen. Next, Keanu stayed quiet too. He had never wanted attention. He simply wanted to enjoy a quiet evening without drama. Yet here he was, sitting next to Chuck Norris, with the entire bar watching their every move. Then something unexpected happened. Chuck looked toward the biker leader's table and gave a small but genuine smile. He raised his hand and motioned for the biker leader to come over. The biker leader hesitated at first. His friends looked at him in surprise. But Chuck's gesture was kind, not threatening. Finally, the biker leader stood up and walked slowly toward their table. His steps were unsure, and his pride was still bruised. When he reached them, he cleared his throat and spoke softly, "Look, I'm sorry for the way we acted earlier." Chuck nodded calmly and said, "That takes courage to say." The biker leader looked at Keanu next. "And I'm sorry for mocking you," he added, almost embarrassed. "I didn't expect you to stay so calm. I guess we judged you too quickly." Keanu smiled gently and replied, "It's okay. We all make mistakes. Sometimes." That simple sentence surprised the biker leader. He wasn't used to being treated kindly after behaving badly. Most people would have yelled back or held a grudge. But Keanu's forgiveness felt genuine and warm. Chuck then spoke again, his voice soft but carrying weight. "Why don't you join us for a drink? Sit for a while, talk with us. No more tension." The biker leader looked confused at first, but then gave a small smile. He nodded and turned to his friends. "Come on," he said. "Let's join them." The other bikers hesitated, but when they saw Chuck smiling, they couldn't say no. Slowly, they got up from their seats and walked over. The bartender raised an eyebrow in surprise, but was happy to see the mood changing so quickly. In just a few minutes, what had started as a tense and uncomfortable evening became something completely different. Chuck, Keanu, and the bikers sat together at the same table. They ordered drinks, but this time, the conversation was friendly and full of laughter. Keanu told a few quiet stories about filming action scenes, making everyone laugh, especially when he shared how many times he had fallen while doing his own stunts. The bikers listened closely, realizing that this man they had mocked was not only kind but also humble and human. Just like them. Chuck shared some old stories too funny, moments from his travels, and times when he had met people from all walks of life. His stories weren't about fighting or showing off. They were about kindness, mistakes, and lessons learned. Little by little, the atmosphere in the bar changed completely. The tension was gone. Even the other customers relaxed and joined in the laughter. For that evening, everyone felt connected, as if they were all part of something special. The biker leader, who had felt so proud and tough earlier, now felt a Different kind of pride in being able to sit at the same table as two men who showed him what true strength looked like. It wasn't about fists or loud words. It was about calm, respect, and forgiveness. As the night went on, the bar filled with warmth and laughter. People who had never spoken to each other before now shared stories and smiles. And in the middle of it all sat Keanu and Chuck, two quiet men who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The night kept moving, and the bar felt different now. The tension that had filled the air earlier was gone, replaced with friendly chatter and light laughter. Chuck and Keanu sat at the table, surrounded by the bikers who, just an hour ago, had tried to embarrass Keanu. But things had changed. The bikers were no longer acting tough. Instead, they were listening, laughing, and showing respect. The bartender watched from behind the counter, quietly amazed. He had seen many nights where things ended badly. But tonight, he was witnessing something rare, a peaceful moment where pride and anger gave way to kindness and understanding. At the table, Keanu listened carefully as the biker leader shared his own story. "You know," the biker said, "I didn't always act like this. I used to be different. Life just got hard somewhere along the way. You stop trusting people, and before you know it, you act like everyone's an enemy." Keanu nodded slowly, his eyes kind and thoughtful. "I understand," he replied gently. "We all go through hard times. Sometimes it makes us act in ways we don't like later." The biker leader looked down at his drink and smiled faintly. "Yeah, guess I forgot what respect looked like," he admitted. His friends listened quietly, realizing their leader was speaking more honestly than he had in a long time. Chuck then spoke, his voice steady but warm. "The strongest people are the ones who can admit when they're wrong," he said, looking around the table. "It's easy to get angry. It's harder to stay calm. What matters is how you choose to act next." The bikers nodded, feeling the weight of those simple words. They realized that tonight wasn't just about what had happened in the bar. It was a reminder about how quickly judgment could cloud kindness, and how quickly kindness could clear judgment away. Keanu leaned forward slightly and asked, "So what brought you all here tonight?" "Just passing through?" The biker leader laughed softly. "Yeah, we've been on the road a while. Long rides, small towns, same old stories. We came in here just looking for a good time, but I guess I let my pride get in the way." Chuck smiled. "Well, looks like the night turned out better than it started." The biker leader agreed. "Yeah, never thought I'd be sitting at a table with Chuck Norris and Keanu Reeves, sharing drinks and stories," he said with a chuckle. Even the other customers in the bar began to relax more. Some came closer, quietly listening in on the conversation. A few even joined in, asking polite questions, making jokes, and laughing together. The whole bar felt like a gathering of old friends now. Keanu took another sip of water and glanced around, noticing how the atmosphere had shifted completely. He didn't need to say much. His calm and gentle presence spoke louder than any words could. Chuck, too, stayed quiet most of the time but offered a warm smile or a thoughtful nod whenever someone spoke. The two men didn't act like celebrities tonight. They acted like regular people who understood what it meant to sit quietly, listen, and show respect. As the evening wore on, something even more surprising happened. One of the younger bikers, who hadn't spoken much all night, finally broke his silence. "Can I ask you something, Keanu?" he said, a little shy. Keanu turned to him with a gentle expression. "Of course," he replied. The young biker hesitated for a moment before asking, "How do you stay so calm, even when people are rude or try to pick a fight?" "I wish I could do that." Keanu thought for a moment before answering. "It's not always easy," he said honestly. "But I try to remember that most people who are angry or rude are usually hurting in some way. If I respond with anger, it only makes things worse. But if I stay calm, sometimes it helps them calm down too." The young biker nodded thoughtfully, clearly taking the advice to heart. The biker leader looked at Keanu and said, "You know, that's the kind of strength people don't talk about enough." Chuck added, "True strength isn't loud, it's quiet but steady. And that's why it's powerful." Everyone around the table seemed to understand that lesson now. The bikers no longer saw Keanu as just a movie star or Chuck as just a famous fighter. They saw two men who had shown them what real strength and respect looked like. The night continued peacefully, with more stories, more laughter, and a new sense of friendship. Even the bartender felt grateful for what he was witnessing. It was rare for a night to begin with conflict but end with understanding. The night felt easy now, like all the heavy air had lifted. Chuck and Keanu remained at the table, their presence calm and kind. The bikers, who had once laughed loudly and acted tough, now sat quietly, speaking with real respect. It was clear that this evening had changed something inside them. The biker leader leaned back in his chair and smiled, a real smile this time, not the smug grin he wore earlier. "You know," he said, "I never thought I'd learn something like this. Tonight, I figured I was just coming in here for drinks and jokes. Turns out I needed this lesson." His friends nodded in agreement, and some of them even laughed gently, admitting to themselves that they had been wrong too. No one tried to pretend they hadn't acted badly. They were just glad to have a chance to do better now. Keanu listened quietly, offering only a soft smile. He didn't speak much, but his silence felt warm, like he truly cared about what was being shared. Chuck sat with his arms folded lightly, giving a few slow nods as he listened too. He understood that sometimes people just needed space to reflect. At one point, the bartender approached the table, holding a fresh round of drinks. He set them down carefully and spoke up for the first time that evening. "This is on the house," he said with a smile. "Not every night we see something like this. I think everyone here will remember tonight for a long time." Chuck gave the bartender a grateful nod, while Keanu quietly said, "Thank you." The bikers looked surprised but happy. They weren't used to kindness coming their way so easily, especially after their earlier behavior. One of the older bikers raised his glass. "To respect," he said simply. Everyone at the table followed, raising their drinks quietly. There was no loud cheer or big toast, just a quiet, genuine moment that felt meaningful. The younger biker who had asked Keanu about staying calm earlier leaned forward again. "So, what keeps you grounded?" he asked softly, curious now in a genuine way. "You've had a life that most of us can't imagine. Fame, fortune, yet here you sit, so peaceful. How do you keep your feet on the ground?" Keanu thought about it for a moment, then answered gently, "I try to remember that no matter how big the world seems, we're all human. We all go through hard times, feel joy, sadness, loss, and love. When I think about that, it's easier to stay grounded." The biker leader looked down at his hands, thinking deeply about those words. "You're right," he admitted. "Sometimes we get so caught up in looking tough or proving something that we forget we're all just people trying to figure things out." Chuck added softly, "That's what strength really is, knowing that everyone's struggling in their own way, and choosing to treat them with kindness anyway." The bikers seemed to truly take this in. They weren't used to talking about feelings or thinking this way. But tonight felt different. No one was rushing to leave. No one wanted to miss another word. The bartender leaned on the counter, watching, with a quiet smile as the room stayed peaceful. Even the other patrons at the bar felt the change in the atmosphere. People who had once kept to themselves were now talking to each other, sharing small smiles, asking friendly questions. The biker leader looked at Keanu and Chuck and said, "You two didn't have to forgive us. You could have embarrassed us right back or walked out and left us feeling like fools. But you stayed, and you treated us better than we deserved. That means something." Keanu's eyes softened as he replied, "Everyone deserves a second chance." Those words hit the biker leader hard. He looked around at his friends who nodded quietly. They all felt the same. The evening rolled on with warmth and gentle conversation. The bikers shared some of their own stories, where they had come from, the roads they had traveled, and the struggles they had faced. For the first time in a long time, they felt truly heard. Chuck and Keanu didn't interrupt or judge. They just listened. The bar that night felt almost like a family gathering, even though many of the people had only met that evening. The laughter was no longer loud and mocking, but soft and genuine. People spoke with kindness and curiosity rather than pride or judgment. It became clear that this night had become something none of them had expected. A simple evening at a small roadside bar had turned into a lesson about respect, kindness, and second chances. Keanu and Chuck remained calm and humble throughout, showing that true strength didn't come from loud words or fighting, but from kindness, patience, and understanding. The night was getting late, but no one in the bar seemed to want to leave. The room was filled with quiet conversations, gentle laughter, and a feeling that something special had happened that evening. The bikers, who had started the night full of pride and loud voices, now sat like old friends at the same table as Chuck and Keanu. Keanu looked around the bar and smiled softly. He noticed how people who had never spoken before were now sitting together, sharing stories and drinks. Even the bartender, who had spent most nights watching people argue and fight, looked peaceful as he cleaned glasses behind the counter. One of the bikers leaned forward, speaking in a quieter voice than usual. "I was thinking, maybe this is the first night in a long time that we're really listening to each other," he said. His words were simple, but everyone at the table nodded in agreement. Chuck lifted his glass and took a slow sip. He didn't say much, but his quiet presence made everyone feel at ease. His calmness didn't need words. It showed that he respected everyone at the table, no matter where they came from or what they'd done earlier that night. Another biker, who had been mostly quiet, finally spoke. "You know, I always thought strength meant being tough, showing no weakness. But after tonight, I'm starting to think maybe strength means being calm even when things get hard." Keanu gave him a warm look and said gently, "That's a good way to put it. Staying calm isn't easy, but it can change everything around you." The biker leader, who had mocked Keanu just hours ago, smiled and added, "And it takes real courage to stay kind even when someone's being rude. We didn't make it easy for you earlier, but you never lost your cool. I respect that." Keanu nodded softly. "It's not about winning or losing," he replied. "It's about understanding." The mood at the table was thoughtful but warm. No one was rushing, and no one felt the need to act tough anymore. For the first time, everyone was being real, just people sharing an evening together. The bartender walked over with a fresh round of drinks. As he set them down, he said quietly, "You know, I've worked here a long time. I've seen plenty of fights and loud nights. But tonight feels different. Feels like everyone's learning something." Chuck looked up at the bartender and gave a small smile. "Sometimes you learn the most when you're not trying to," he said kindly. The bikers laughed gently at that. They couldn't believe that they had started the night trying to make a joke out of Keanu and were now sitting here feeling grateful just to be part of this peaceful evening. As the night went on, the conversation shifted from personal stories to laughter and friendly teasing, but everything stayed light and respectful. The young biker who had asked Keanu about staying calm earlier leaned in again. "So what do you do when people keep pushing you? How do you stay patient?" he asked honestly. Keanu thought for a moment before answering. "I remind myself that their anger isn't about me," he said softly. "Most of the time, it's something going on inside them. If I react with anger, it just makes it worse. If I stay patient, sometimes they calm down too." The young biker nodded thoughtfully. "That's something I've never tried. I always thought you had to push back right away." Chuck added quietly, "You don't have to meet anger with anger. Sometimes silence and respect are stronger." Another biker, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "You two have taught us more tonight than most people have in years," he said honestly. "I think we needed this." Even the other customers in the bar seemed to feel it. They were all more relaxed, more open. A few even came over to thank Keanu and Chuck quietly, saying how the whole evening had made them feel hopeful about people again. Keanu listened and smiled gently but didn't look for praise. Chuck gave his usual small nods and quiet words. They didn't need to be the center of attention. They just wanted to enjoy the peace that had come over the place. The bikers, who had walked into that bar full of pride and noise, now felt humbled but happy. They realized they had come in looking for a night of fun, but had found something more meaningful instead. They weren't just entertained. They had been changed. As the bartender refilled their glasses one last time, the biker leader looked at Chuck and Keanu and said, "Thank you for not walking away and for showing us a better way to handle things." Keanu's voice was gentle as he replied, "We all learn from each other. Tonight, we all learned something." Chuck smiled, his eyes kind. The bikers smiled too, knowing this was a night they would remember for a very long time. The night was slowly coming to an end, but nobody was rushing to leave. The bar, which had felt tense and uncomfortable earlier, now felt warm and friendly. Even the bikers, who had arrived full of pride and attitude, sat calmly at the table, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere they hadn't expected when they walked in. Keanu sat quietly, his gentle smile never fading. He didn't say much, but everyone could feel the kindness he carried. Chuck sat beside him, relaxed, sipping his water and giving soft nods as people spoke. It was clear that neither of them needed attention or praise. They were just happy to sit, listen, and share a calm moment with everyone around them. The bartender, who had worked there for years and seen all kinds of situations, leaned on the counter and smiled. He thought about how rare it was to witness this kind of change. In one evening, a night that could have easily ended in a fight had instead become something special, a night people would remember. The biker leader looked at his friends and then at Keanu and Chuck. He spoke softly, but everyone at the table could hear him. "I'm glad we didn't ruin this night," he said honestly. "I came in thinking I was strong, thinking I could laugh at people and look tough. But sitting here now, I realize that strength isn't about how loud you are. It's about staying calm and showing respect, even when it's hard." Keanu gave a small nod, his voice soft but steady. "That's a hard lesson for all of us," he replied. "But once we learn it, we carry it with us everywhere." One of the younger bikers leaned forward, looking thoughtful. "You know, this might sound strange," he said, "but tonight feels like a fresh start, like maybe we can be different after this." Chuck finally spoke again, his voice calm and warm. "It's never too late for a fresh start," he said. "What matters is what you choose to do next." The biker leader smiled and said, "We'll remember that, and we'll remember this night." Everyone at the table fell quiet for a moment, letting those words sink in. There was a peaceful silence, a comfortable pause where no one felt the need to speak. Then, Keanu quietly reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. He didn't say anything, but he placed a few bills on the table and caught the bartender's eye. The bartender gave a grateful nod, understanding immediately. Keanu had quietly paid for everyone's drinks, including those of the other customers who were still in the bar. The bikers were surprised. "You didn't have to do that," the biker leader said gently, almost embarrassed. Keanu smiled kindly. "I wanted to," he replied simply. That small act of generosity felt like the perfect way to end the night. The bikers realized that true kindness wasn't about making a show or looking for praise. It was about small actions that showed respect and care for others. Chuck stood up slowly and gave a small wave to the bartender. "Good place you have here," he said calmly. "Take care." The bartender smiled warmly. "You two are welcome any time," he replied. Keanu rose from his chair too. He gave the biker leader one final smile. "Take care of yourselves," he said gently, "and take care of each other." The biker leader nodded sincerely. "We will," he promised. Chuck and Keanu walked toward the door together, side by side. The whole bar watched quietly as they left, feeling a sense of respect that went far beyond celebrity or fame. They didn't just see movie stars, they saw two men who had shown patience, humility, and true strength without ever raising their voices or their fists. As the door closed behind them, the biker leader looked around at his friends and the other people in the bar. He smiled in a way that felt genuine and peaceful. "We're lucky they came in tonight," he said softly. His friends nodded in agreement. The young biker who had asked Keanu about patience leaned back in his chair, thinking about everything he'd learned that evening. The bartender returned to his place behind the counter, feeling good about the night for the first time in a long time. He knew that this story would be told again and again, not as a tale of a fight that almost happened, but as a story of kindness, respect, and how one evening had changed people's hearts. And so the night ended, not with anger or regret, but with a quiet sense of peace. The bikers left the bar a little different than when they came in, humbled, thoughtful, and grateful for the chance to learn what true strength really looked like. It was a night they would remember for years to come.